Welcome everybody. This is the Partnership and Collaboration Guidance for the Enhancing Neuroscience Diversity through Undergraduate Research Education Experiences, or ENDURE program. We just have a few housekeeping items and then we'll get started. So that you know, we have captions and live transcript at the bottom of your screen. Also know that you can type questions into the Q&A box at any time. You can also ask questions anonymously. You can upvote questions and so on. You can also post any comments in the chat. You can chat the hosts and panelists directly or chat everybody. But again, try to keep your questions to the Q&A box. We are recording this webinar, and the recording and a whole bunch of resources, all the slides that we share today, will be available in a couple weeks. Your speakers for today are primarily going to be Dr. Marguerite Matthews. She is the Career Preparation Section Chief in the Office of Programs to Enhance the Neuroscience Workforce. She'll be presenting some slides for you today, and then joining us for the Q&A will be Dr. Michelle Jones-London, the Associate Director of Open at NINDS, and Dr. Letitia Jones, the Scientific Review Officer at NINDS. Just for a brief overview of the plan, you'll hear about the program vision and purpose, the expectations for program partnerships and collaboration. That's really the core of what we're going to be talking about today. We'll also go over some select review criteria and final reminders and considerations, and we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. We're really here to answer all of your questions. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Matthews to get us started.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abrahimi. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending, or for those of you who might be watching at a later date. This webinar is really meant to be complementary to our previous webinar that offered some technical assistance, breaking down the entire application process for ENDURE. This will specifically kind of focus on the partnerships and collaboration aspect, which I think is the hardest to capture in the NOFO perhaps, but we really want to offer some deeper insight into what we are looking for as the NIH Blueprint and Brain Initiative in terms of investment and what we expect out of the ENDURE program. So I will go over a few fundamental aspects of the ENDURE mechanism, but really would like to get a little bit deeper into what the partnerships and collaborations could look like and what the expectations are with respect to our review criteria. So the purpose of this NOFO and the rationale is to prepare undergraduate students from diverse backgrounds, and that includes those from groups underrepresented in the biomedical and behavioral sciences, to enter into PhD degree programs in the neurosciences, or with a focus on the neuroscientists. And the way we plan to achieve that through this NOFO is to support the educational activities that would focus around research experiences, mentoring activities, and courses for skill development. And I'll go into a little bit more about what that looks like in just a second. So just as a snapshot of how things are going with ENDURE and how our purpose has been actualized, is currently, as of today, approximately 50% of trainees who have gone through this program are actively participating in post-undergraduate education and research training. So the majority of those folks are in PhD programs, many of whom have a neuroscience focus. Certainly we recognize that neuroscience programs are not necessarily across the country. Not every institution has a neuroscience focus or a specific neuroscience degree, but many of those folks are opting to participate in neuroscience-related research. We do also have some trainees that go on to participate in MD-focused programs, and that does include the dual degree MD PhD programs. Even fewer going into other doctoral specialties, such as a PharmD or a PsyD, to lean really into that psychological behavioral aspect. Really proud to see so many of the trainees who have already finished their graduate work and on to postdoctoral research, also in residency programs, and those who are pursuing post-baccalaureate opportunities to strengthen their research experiences to prepare them to enter into graduate programs. So Endure is working as it is intended to prepare these undergraduate students to go into graduate school, or at least have a better idea of what they want to pursue in terms of research and moving on to the next step. So if it's not made clear already, we expect that these programs will fit within the neuroscience mission areas of the Blueprint and Brain Initiative institutes and centers at the NIH that participate. And so that means there are a wide range of opportunities for students to be involved in the neurosciences. So while we wouldn't expect the focus to only be on one of the mission areas of these institutes, it may span a couple of those missions. Maybe it's really open, and so it hits on perhaps multiple institute focuses, but the general idea is to increase this cross-cutting, the pathway that's cross-cutting across different neuroscience areas, bringing together a really rich, diverse neuroscience community. And perhaps this may not be the right fit for you if you're not able to provide experiences in a number of these different areas. We do encourage you to look at some other resources for R25 opportunities that may fit better with what your institution or what your specific program is looking to do. Say you have a strong epilepsy research program or a neurodegeneration, and think about if this really is the right opportunity for you. So, in thinking about what institutions should be participating in this mechanism, which is really the draw of why we're all here today, and thinking about this, we really want this to be a collaborative effort across different institutional types. And so that means one or more institutions that have a historical and current mission to educate students from any of the populations that have been identified as underrepresented in the biomedical research workforce, or have a documented track record of recruiting, training, and or educating and graduating underrepresented students. So you may think of these two things like perhaps a minority serving institution, such as a historically Black college or university. They have a historical and current mission to educate students from that background. But there are also schools that may have a predominantly Black population or predominantly Pacific Islander or those from tribal communities, but may not have the designation of a tribal community or college or university. This would be also working together with a research-intensive institution that has been defined as having an existing neuroscience or neuroscience-related program that also has a significant number of mentors that hold NIH funding that would support a rich research experience. And we're also looking for institutions that have neuroscience-focused graduate research training programs. So they are in the business of providing very specific formal training for the PhD experience and can therefore best provide insight into preparing students coming from other institutions to be able to enter into such a program by giving them advice about what is necessary, what they're looking for in terms of admissions, also allowing students to get an inside glimpse of what is happening in those training programs. And so there may be a combination of opportunities that are happening with these sort of three different distinctions of what we're looking for. And I'll also give some examples of how that may play out in a partnered proposal. So you have these different institutional types that are coming together to provide a robust research and educational experience. And we're looking at expecting these Endure programs to essentially cover 2 years worth of experience. Part of each of those years will include the academic year or the school year, where students have access or opportunities to engage in part-time research, have dedicated mentoring, and also have access to courses for skill development. That could be in techniques that are based in the laboratory. It could be different coursework that's focused on neuroscience or other neuroscience related subjects such as statistics, coding. And then there's dedicated time in the summer for these trainees to have full-time research experiences at a rigorous research institution that also potentially has these neuroscience training programs where they can network and they can learn about what these programs, these research intensive programs have to offer and what it could be like for them, for trainees to be a part of those programs. And so we expect that in general, an Endure student is going to participate in year-round neuroscience research experiences. They're going to develop various technical research and professional skills. They're going to have outstanding mentorship, hopefully from a number of different faculty in which they're interacting with over the course of these 2 years. They will be networking with graduate programs, and that does include the faculty of those programs as well as the trainees that are involved in those programs. And in general, they'll be forming a very diverse and vibrant neuroscience community where they see themselves fitting, being welcomed, being included, and being encouraged to further continue their education and training in these PhD programs. All right. So with all of that in mind, it's important to remember what the eligibility is for the participating organizations for this Endure mechanism. Eligible organizations include public, state, private institutions. These may include minority serving institutions, which could be private, could be public, could be state schools. And those are all eligible. And we also do allow for scientific societies and small businesses to be part of this, this Endure consortium. Foreign institutions are not eligible to apply. There can only be one application per institution. And this is usually, you can identify this by a UEI or an IPF number. Really encourage everyone to talk with their grants office about that. So one application per institution, but this should be something that is a discussion that is ongoing so that you aren't hopefully having to have your application withdrawn. And I do want to underscore that the sponsoring institution must assure support for the proposed program. So while there is funding to support student stipends, other enrichment activities, travel to conferences, and some administration costs, there has to be commitment from the sponsoring institution to ensure the success of this program. So your application will need to include appropriate institutional commitment, which may include staff, facilities, and educational resources. Because again, if we think back to the previous slide of what the different program components are, rich research environments, access to courses, access to mentorship, and networking opportunities, that has to be built in. And there is just not enough in the budget for that to happen sort of on its own through the Endure proposal. So in thinking about how to put all these pieces together, I want to give a few examples. These are not exhaustive examples, just thinking about what has come through the Endure, the funded mechanisms that we've had, and formatting or structuring that we've seen that seems to work really well. So in this instance, we have an R1 host institution. We won't say any names, but you all know what an R1 institution is. And I say host because they're serving in this instance as the grantee institution. And perhaps they've connected with a public institution that may or may not be in the same geographic location. And perhaps also there's a minority serving institution, say a tribal college or a Hispanic serving institution or an HBCU that has decided to partner. Perhaps there are longstanding collaborations with that institution. And so there are students that are being recruited from each of these institutions. Perhaps a public institution is largely a commuter institution. So they are seeing a lot of students who are from underrepresented backgrounds, perhaps who have not been able to travel away from home. And so they're perhaps still living at home or living close by. And this minority serving institution also is, they're surrounded in enriched environments of many students from diverse backgrounds, and very likely, just as is the nature of things, the R1 institution, perhaps not as diverse, but does serve to have a very rich research environment. Students may be coming from all three of these different institutions to participate as Endure scholars. What tends to happen is that there's programming offered at each of the different institutions for students to have their coursework done. Maybe this happens online, maybe it's happening at the individual campuses, but the R1 is essentially serving as the hub for summer research institutions. So the students from the public institutions and students from these other minority serving institutions may all travel to meet up with their R1 student colleagues at the R1 institution, where they will have a summer research opportunity. I should also note that participating faculty from each of the partnering institutions should provide comparable experiences for participating students. And again, think about what the purpose is, how you are serving these students, what you hope to gain. Certainly, there are going to be different experiences at each of these institutions. They all have their strengths. They all have things that they do really well, but you don't want it to be a situation where one institution is treated as a lesser institution because it doesn't have X experiences or doesn't have faculty with, say, R01 level funding. These should all be treated as equal, recognizing that each institution plays a different type of role. So in some instances, this setup, we also see an opportunity for students to have additional experiences outside of the host institution. So perhaps during summer one, everyone meets up at the host institution to do their summer experiences, built-in community building activities in addition to their full-time research. But perhaps on the second summer of full-time research, you want these Endure students to have experiences with other institutions to learn about what other programs have to offer. So there may be these additional partners, not necessarily lesser partners, but other partners that have robust summer research opportunities for undergraduate students. And these students are getting a chance to, again, diversify their network, get new experiences, and sort of vet different schools and what they have to offer them as they are thinking about applying to the next step. In a different example, we certainly don't want to give the impression that only R1 institutions are accepted or acceptable in this proposal. We recognize there are many institutions that have high research capacity or a high research activity. So these may be R2 institutions or institutions that probably have larger undergraduate populations, but may not have as much NIH research funding. And we've seen instances where an institution like an R2 institution will partner with other local institutions that do not have any research capacity or have very little research opportunities for students, and be a central hub where these students are able to travel fairly easily to the R2 institution for their academic year, and then again through the summer for full-time research. Again, there may be students coming from each of these institutions, perhaps the non-research institutions as well as the R2 institution. Again, participating faculty are all providing comparable experiences. So students at one type of institution are not being disadvantaged for students that are at a different type of institution. And oftentimes these R2 can leverage different benefits for their students that R1s may not have. And again, this is just a different type of example that we have seen work really well and boost the underrepresented student populations that they're working with, while also empowering other schools that don't have research capacity to come together to provide a really enriched opportunity for students. And in one final example, something that we're also getting a chance to see more of is opportunities where that there's, say, an R1 institution that has partnerships with local community colleges. Again, community colleges tend to have students that are from diverse backgrounds, non-traditional students, students from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups, economic disadvantaged backgrounds, who are at the community colleges and looking to transfer to a four-year college to complete their bachelor's degree. And so in this instance, there is sort of an additional help for those students to transfer into the R1 institution. So perhaps these students were already thinking about transferring, or maybe they were on the cusp. I'm not sure if that was something they wanted to do, but through an Endure mechanism, there's the R1 institution partnering with these local community colleges, creating relationships before they're interacting with students, working with community college faculty to provide additional coursework that perhaps may not already be existent there, to have students become interested, and then allowing students to enter into the Endure program and then perhaps be more inclined to fully transfer into the four-year college and complete their work there. So the way this works is you're having students are sort of transferring, like truly transferring, being funneled into another institution, not for just the summer, but for a year or more. And oftentimes these programs show a special attention to helping these students not only transition to different college settings, but also transferring into where perhaps there may be more opportunities to participate in rigorous coursework, research, et cetera. And so this has been something that we have been really excited to see more attention to, institutions creating more opportunities. It's almost a two-way street. So these local community colleges are going to naturally see students move from that college onto another four-year university, but providing a lot of other opportunities for the faculty there to have access to their colleagues at these other four-year universities that have different levels of expertise come in and work together to make sure that this is an equal partnership, even though students are having to leave just out of necessity. And so I want to, now we've heard about a few of the models of what it could look like. Again, this is not exhaustive. If you have other ideas, other setups, we certainly welcome that. But also, again, recognizing to leverage some things. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about expectations for these partnerships and collaborations. So this information can all be found in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, but I want to highlight that here because I think it's important to understand what the language is and how that relates to these partnerships and collaborations. Under institutional environment and commitment, we ask that the proposal describe the feasibility through direct lines of communication and site-specific administration, research education, and research experience responsibilities across those partnering institutions. Even if the two institutions are right next to each other, geographically located, still want to talk about how are faculty talking to each other? How are the program directors talking? How are the students able to interact? Do not take for granted that simply because two institutions may be closely located, that magically everything works out and there's no issues about communication, expectations. It's really important to emphasize how things will be communicated, what roles everyone will have, especially recognizing that there has to be some level of communication and interaction between the undergraduate students who are participating in the program with say, graduate neuroscience programs that these students may be sort of matriculating into these graduate programs. How are you going to facilitate that? What does that look like? Making sure it's made very clear who is responsible for what, and how those expectations will be communicated. A description of other currently federally funded undergraduate research education and research training programs across all the collaborating sites. So if Institution A has a National Science Foundation REU grant, and also another institution has an NIH R25 grant that helps with undergraduate research, it's important to understand how those programs are going to enhance the Endure program. Or if it's a T32, an NIH training grant that is sort of hosting a lot of these more intensive research opportunities, that should be laid out very clear what each institution has to offer, but how they will be working together to provide, again, enhanced experiences for Endure trainees. Thinking about recruitment, there's a specific section that requires a recruitment plan to enhance diversity. Again, think about where the students are being recruited from, what institutions they're coming from, and make clear what the efforts are being undertaken by the research education program and how these might coordinate with the recruitment efforts of other participating institutions. This is not just thinking about the recruitment to the program, but also thinking about how students are coming into perhaps these institutions, how they're being recruited. If the goal is to increase diversity at an R1 institution, for instance, what are the efforts that are being done there, and how will this Endure program enhance those efforts? Or perhaps you're looking to increase the diversity of a specific program. So the neuroscience major or the neuroscience graduate program, how are those efforts being undertaken? Any centralized institutional efforts alone does not satisfy this requirement. So it can't just be, we're, this neuroscience program, we recruit at the ABRCAMS conference, the annual biomedical research conference for minoritized scientists, or SOCNIS, the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans. That is not enough. There has to be much more specific. Again, what is Endure doing to enhance, to be in addition to the institution's opportunity? Funneling students from the nearby HBCU is not enough. So there should be really important thought into what the recruitment is, both from the institution, but also for this program, what they're going to do that is more than what is already happening. And participating faculty are expected to be actively involved in recruitment efforts. So it is not just on the program directors. There has to be some level of interaction. I think this goes back to the previous slide around institutional commitment. If everyone is invested and everyone is seen, all the participating faculty are seen as contributing members to this, then everyone plays their part in sharing information with their student body, thinking about what that means for them and their recruitment for research experiences, for undergraduate admissions. This really is not to be thought of only as one person's job or the program coordinator. It is not their job. Everyone should show that there's a role that they're playing in terms of making these recruitment efforts successful. And thinking about those aspects, I want to talk about sort of some markers of strong partnerships, or what we have seen really has allowed us to have the fantastic outcomes that we have, but also allowing programs to continue year after year. When we have multi-PD PIs, everyone brings their varying institutional perspectives and skills to enhance the research education program. So it's not just PDs from the R1 institution, not just a PD from that has served as a T32 training director, but the PD may also, or one of the PDPIs may also be faculty at the Liberal Arts College that is serving as part of this partnership. Again, this should not be one-sided. There should be multiple. If there's a multi-PI system, that should certainly be made clear, and making it evident in the application itself how each program director, principal investigator are coming together to make this, that will make this program successful. Having synergy of in the program with existing institutional programs, as I mentioned before, this might be in form of the T32s, other R25s, NSF RUs. And this is not to say the burden is on these programs to handle that. No, this is an integration, collaboration in some senses. Again, this ENDURE mechanism is specific for the neurosciences. Oftentimes the NSF RUs are not science, they're science agnostic. They're not specific, certainly not to neuroscience in many cases. Many R25s may leverage various opportunities that may not be specific to one scientific area. Really think about how to utilize the strengths of those programs, what they've been doing to enhance and work collaboratively in your ENDURE model. Also having explicit communication on expectations between the programs, or between the program PIs, participating faculty, and student trainees. There shouldn't be questions about who is responsible for what. We see this sometimes in something that may be between the mentors and the mentees, a contract showing these are what the expectations are. We've made it clear on our website. We've made it clear during the interview process, but we're also making it clear that each of the people that are coming into communion are able to say what it is that the expectations are, being able to monitor progress, deal with any issues that may arise, but also program PIs communicating with the students what their expectations are. Perhaps each student is at a different institutional site, and so there's still communication that's happening even when the students are not physically located with the program directors or perhaps some other faculty mentors. Having these things be explicit in the application is a show of strong partnerships. Additionally, I really want to emphasize making sure that participating faculty are coming from each of the partnering institutions, and each faculty participant is given the opportunity to contribute meaningfully. Everyone's not going to have the same role. Some institutions perhaps focus on undergraduate education. That is not something to be looked at lightly. And so those faculty who have become experts in undergraduate education certainly should have the opportunity to contribute to this program, as well as faculty, say at R1s, who understand what robust, rigorous research looks like and can tell students what the expectations are once they enter into graduate programs. All of these varied strengths and expertise should be leveraged and should be seen as equal partners, and not just, well, we have all the resources, and so we're the ones who are making the decisions. And that does come through in these applications. And I really, really hope you all understand how important it is to make sure that everyone's at the table deciding what their role will be, but also, again, being clearly communicated in the application itself. When roles are defined, that also is really helpful. What the PIs are responsible for, what the participating faculty, institutional administration, especially if that's being included in the institutional commitment, how are all of these entities working together? What are their roles? And clearly outline strategies to balance experiences. Students coming from, say, a different location at a liberal arts college are fundamentally going to have a different college experience than students who are attending, say, an R1 institution for their undergraduate studies. Those are just you can't change those differences, but you can create more balanced opportunities for these students to shine, whether it's through coursework, opportunities for networking, different professional development. Every opportunity should be taken to make sure that there aren't students who feel less than, or students who feel like they are perhaps at a different level than the other students. There should be some level of standardizing in whatever way you can, whatever that may look like. It may be a geographical challenge that you have to overcome, or perhaps it's institutional type. But whatever your structure is, be sure to make that clear in the application of how you're going to be able to deal with any potential barriers. And going through some pitfalls or some things that come up that perhaps are seen in review as weaknesses. When you have students who are traveling to different institutions, maybe it's a long distance, maybe it's just a 40-minute train ride, but sometimes there's different aspects of what they're getting, or maybe student A is going to one institution, a student B is going to another institution, but those two institutions, while both say are one institutions, maybe they're getting very different things. One has a different setup where they're having lunch every single day with graduate students, whereas the other program perhaps doesn't allow the undergraduate students to interact with graduate trainees in the neuroscience programs. So again, think about what your partnerships are and what your expectations are of the people that you're bringing on board. Again, it's not that we expect everybody to be the same, but again, there should be some comparable experiences and some level of uniformity in what you expect your students to be able to get out of, so that they're not getting less or there's not disparate sort of experiences. Certainly a big thing that continues to come up is partner in name only. So they provided a letter of support, they have their biosketch, but it's very unclear what how this faculty truly is going to be participating. They don't have really a defined role, or the institution itself is simply a farm for students. So we're going to take your students, we're going to utilize them to increase the number of diversity within our program, and then we'll send them back to you, and then we'll take them again in the next summer. That is not a partner. That is simply a school from whom you're recruiting students from. That is not the idea of the Endure program. These are partners, these are collaborators. They have to have a role other than allowing you access to their students. So try to avoid situations where it seems that way. Maybe that's not the intention, but when you're not really engaging these institutions, these faculty, the staff there, it shows that they are really just seen as someone who can say, we're able to get all these students from this really great institution that serves underrepresented trainees, but we are not actively allowing them to have a role in our leadership as mentors, et cetera. Participating faculty and other research mentors across the institutions don't have access to comparable mentor training. This is a big thing that tends to come up, where you're only providing mentor training at one institution, but faculty at other institutions may not have access to that, or are getting different types of mentor training. So there's no uniformity. And the people who are at risk the most are the students who are not getting faculty who have been appropriately and properly trained. So again, think about what that can look like and how you can make it as comparable, as uniform as possible. Again, I mentioned the letters of support, making sure that you're not getting commitment from people who don't have an active role, or a role that is defined, and then institutions that that do not have neuroscience training programs, or there are minority serving institutions that are listed as partners, but the faculty from those institutions don't have an active role. And I think I've already mentioned this previously, but what I wanted to mention here with this particular bullet point is that this isn't just a recruitment opportunity. This isn't just about the students. There has to be an investment in the faculty at all of the institutions, because there's perhaps some, I don't want to say deficits, but there perhaps are some things that just are not available at one institution type versus another. So R1s and R2s, perhaps they're seeing a lot of graduate students, maybe fewer undergraduate students. So that's just not their expertise as undergraduate education. There's something to be gained from their counterparts at schools, perhaps that do have an emphasis on undergraduate training, or perhaps they're faculty from one school that are used to teaching hundreds of students in a class at a time and are not used to having smaller classes, where there's the opportunity for more interaction, more one-on-one discussions, or smaller group discussions. Those are all things that can be used as benefits, but being able to showcase what how those things can come through with what different institutions and what different faculty have to bring to light. And so I just want to highlight, there are things all over, like all throughout the review criteria that really speak to what it is that we just discussed in terms of partnerships and collaboration. Specifically thinking about the significance, will the proposed ENDURE program significantly improve the institutional baseline of the number of students from partner institutions that enter high quality competitive graduate programs in the neurosciences? In looking at the investigator section, if the project is collaborative or multi-PDPI, do the investigators have complementary and integrated expertise? Are their leadership approach, governance, and organizational structure appropriate for the project? Again, just sticking someone's name on there because they are known to get a lot of, say, diversity targeted awards is not enough. Someone who's just doing T32 training is not enough. There has to be some evidence that this all works together to make sure that your proposed program is successful. In the innovation section, taking into consideration the nature of the proposed research, the research education program, does the applicant make a strong case for this program effectively reaching an audience in need of the program's offerings? And lastly, in the approach section, there are two separate bullet points that really get to this aspect of partnership and collaboration. Do the proposed research experiences and courses for skills development meet the needs of participating students who are enrolled full-time at one of the applicant institutions, including those from underrepresented groups? And are they designed to support their competitiveness for completion of a PhD degree in neuroscience? And if there isn't, how are you going to fill that gap? Does the program demonstrate that participants will have authentic, meaningful research experiences in neuroscience-related laboratories? Again, that should all be made clear in the application proposal. Oh, lastly, that wasn't last. The environment is the last section. Again, there are many bullet points that reach what the partnerships and collaborations should be touching on. Where appropriate, is there evidence of collaboration and buy-in among participating programs, departments, and institutions? How well and in what way does this program interact with on and off-site neuroscience training programs? Is there evidence of commitment and integration with the T32 program beyond just summer research exposure? And in this example, graduate program faculty are involved in teaching the undergraduate program during the academic year, or research seminars, or perhaps there's an opportunity for the students to attend the T32 program programming activities that are happening. So I just want to leave you with a few final reminders and considerations, because we know this is a heavy undertaking to put these proposals together. We are not under any delusion that even applications that perhaps miss the mark in terms of the partnerships and collaborations, it's still a heavy lift. But there are some things that you have to be able to pay attention to avoid all of that hard work, having your application withdrawn or not getting reviews that are constructive for what it is that you're trying to propose. I think this is easy to overlook because it is not required, but I implore you all to be, if you are serious about submitting an application, your letter of intent really can give us an opportunity before you submit to make sure that we are appropriately reviewing this, but also that we can check to see that you have indeed had conversations around what these partnering institutions will look like. So letters of intent are typically due 30 days before the deadline. Again, this is not required to apply, but it is incredibly helpful for our ability to appropriately review, and also to make sure that we're all on the same page about what the expectations are. Be mindful of the NOFO, especially those pesky appendix materials. This is the last submission. February 10th of 2025 is the last submission date before this NOFO expires. We do not know if it will be reissued in the future, but it certainly won't be reissued next year. This NOFO typically comes out every 4 years. And so if you are thinking about applying for the February deadline, just know that the funding will likely not start until December 2025 or December 2025 at the earliest. So plan accordingly with your partnering institutions to make sure everyone knows what the budget expectations are. And the program structure is not one size fit all. I won't go into the details, but this is your program. You can structure it how you want. But again, remember, it should be about what you say you're trying to accomplish and also be able to address each of the criteria within the notice of funding opportunity. And we will have office hours. So if your question doesn't get answered today or some questions come up after this webinar, you need additional clarification, you've had a chance to talk with your partners, but you still want to have some feedback, please sign up for our office hours. We would be happy to discuss this more in depth with you and your team. And so now Dr. Jones-London and Dr. Jones will join me to answer any questions. I have Dr. Jones-London and I's email. We check the NINDS diversity training email, but please know that we can answer your program questions. If there's something that deals with review, we're happy to bring in Dr. Jones, but she can also provide some insight from previous review study sections that we've had.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. Hello, everybody. I'm back. I'm Anna Ibrahimi. I'm here to help moderate the Q&A. All right. So with this, thank you all so much for your questions. We really appreciate them. We're going to give Dr. Matthews a little bit of a break, and I'll pass the first question to Dr. Jones-London. And these actually, there's a couple frequently asked questions just for the recording. I know you've answered a few of them already, but is there a maximum number of institutions that can participate? And then kind of also along those lines, is there a right number of students that can be supported? Could you start with the answer?
Yeah, and I in the chat always list the Goldilocks question in terms of what is that right magic number? And it may sound like a cop-out when we say it really depends, right? You're dealing with a lot of things. You're dealing with your environment. You're dealing with your capacity for recruitment. You're dealing with a budget that is capped at a certain amount. That money stretches sometimes less further depending on the institution and what you already have there. I thought Dr. Matthews did a great job describing we love synergy, right? We certainly recognize that within the space when it comes to training, you may even have a mark, a rise, other things around you that you can synergize and be able to stretch the dollars further. Other places you may not have these things, and you may need to actually use the budget on a lot of things to establish. And so when it comes to those partners and how many more partners you can have, I put the link in the chat to give you an idea of the range that we have for our existing programs. You will see some programs have 5 partners, some have up to 12. A lot of that will come in terms of how you're defining your summer exposures for the students. Certainly there, you could have a bunch of people on sort of tap, and depending on the student interests, some years you'll use or engage with those partners, maybe some years not, just because the research interest from the trainees isn't there. So it is really, I would say, a really dynamic number. The only thing that I can really speak to is the minimum. You will never see one. That goes against everything that we just talked about in terms of why we created this program, in terms of certainly there are institutions that are one-stop shop, everything is housed there, and they could expose everyone to everything, but that's not the spirit of the Endure program. The spirit of the Endure program is really creating the sense of community partnership and exposure to trainees outside of perhaps maybe just what they're used to in a state, in an environment, in a different type of institution. And so you're going to see, I would say at most, the minimum is 3 institutions where, as you can see from the link that Dr. Ibrahimi just put in the chat, most go beyond that in terms of fully exposing students. So that's my very long-winded answer into I have no answer for a perfect number.
Thank you, Dr. Jones-London. I know we get that question a lot, so it's great that you answered it in detail. Thank you. One question, Dr. Jones, because some programs are looking to apply for renewals. So can you talk a little bit more through the measures of success and any tips for resubmissions or renewals, rather?
Absolutely. Well, for renewals and even first-time applications, it's really important to kind of follow what's already in the NOFO, right? But just to overemphasize it again, progress, success, and follow-up, right? So what are the objectives and the goals of the program, and how are you going to measure the progress and success of reaching those goals? And even taking it further, what's going on with the participants? Are there follow-ups with the participants to allow for further evaluation of the effectiveness of this program? All of those things are definitely written within the NOFO, but I kind of want to emphasize it again for the sake of reviewers that are having these conversations in the background, right? They get very excited when the intentionality is behind the measurement of this success, and they get disappointed when they don't see that, right? Because they want to see these programs thrive and move forward because they see the potential benefit of having this, where it could help out the scientific workforce in the future and completely change what the demographics or the representation across the board for careers in the future in science. So they want to be able to see that these programs are going to thrive, and it starts at the foundation, looking at milestones, potential pitfalls, same things you would consider in your research grants, considering it for this program as well, and making sure that you're crossing the T's and dotting on the I's and considering anything and everything across the board for these types of programs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. Dr. Matthews, you're back on the hook. That was a short break. All right. One question that we had was around your example 3, around the community colleges. Just asking for maybe a little bit more clarification on the relationship building with those community colleges, especially with the kind of academic institutional transfer. What kind of activities might be appropriate or high priority with Endure?
Yeah, I think what I'm going to suggest is more high level. Ultimately, the institution that is thinking about partnering with these community colleges is going to have to decide what is the purpose of the connection, right? Is it that local community colleges don't have neuroscience courses, and so you're not only going to expose students enrolled in those colleges to neuroscience, but then you're going to help them transfer into your school that has a neuroscience program so that they feel like they're ready to perhaps take on the major, perhaps do research, et cetera. Or perhaps the community colleges have a number of different opportunities to learn about neuroscience, and you're simply enhancing what they're already learning and bringing, and once they're transferring in, you're allowing them to continue on in this educational journey. So know your audience first, know what you're working with and how you want to engage. Certainly thinking about working with faculty. So perhaps it's faculty that are doing general biology. And so maybe there's a course on neuroscience and they ask you to come and teach part of that, or ask to help them develop curriculum that allows them to teach neuroscience. Or perhaps you're hosting career research opportunities at the community college so that students are able to participate and think perhaps maybe I want to try a neuroscience major once I transfer into the four-year college. It can look a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be one way, but certainly making sure that you're building inroads with the faculty, with the administration there, understanding what the needs of the students are. Maybe you're enrolling the students in the Endure program prior to their transfer, or maybe you decide we'll do some of the groundwork while they're still at the community college, but we'll have them enroll in the Endure program once they've officially transferred into this program. Again, it doesn't have to look one way. We have a few funded programs that if you want to take a look at their web pages, we have that on the Endure website. And again, I think there's two slightly different approaches that mean something to them with that particular community. I mean, there are lots of places that have really robust strong two-year colleges where you wouldn't necessarily know that it was a junior college other than they're only allowed to confer associate's degrees. But then there are other places perhaps that certainly have a rich student body, but they just don't have the resources. They don't have the expertise to allow access to different neuroscience and neuroscience related coursework. So I would say think about what is around and how you want to fill that particular need, and then start building relationships of what that could look like, what a particular structure could be.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. We have one question in the chat kind of around the effects of COVID-19, especially for those that are going in for a renewal. Should they talk about the effect that COVID-19 has had, especially on the training gaps? Dr. Jones-London, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, and we've gotten that question a lot, right? And certainly for other mechanisms at NIH, people have been given guidance, to not talk about it or mention it. I think for the training mechanisms, it's appropriate, especially within the framing of outcomes, especially if it, 2019, 2020, 2021, sort of adding a sentence there as a reminder. We all experienced the same storm, but several of us were perhaps in different boats at the time of the storm. And so I think adding context to your outcomes, making sure that as you talk about the evaluation that you give that lens, I think it's fine. I wouldn't belabor it, but I would address it.
Wonderful, thank you. I think maybe we'll just have this question. I know it's been answered, but I want it for the recording. Just kind of around coursework. Do courses have to be specific for Endure, or can we take advantage of existing courses at one institution? And also, if students are at multiple institutions, do they all need to take the same courses? Maybe that could just be clarified for the recording. Dr. Jones-London, do you want to take that one again? Oh.
Hold on. So yeah, I think once again, this will depend on how this looks, right? Certain places where they're working with multiple institutions, they're meeting virtually. We've seen a lot of that, speaking of COVID, a lot of people, because of their creativity and innovativeness, develop these virtual sort of courses and programming during that time, perhaps maybe when it was envisioned to be in person, and they just kept that after it. So there's some way that you can provide sort of the same instruction to everyone at the same time. There are other places where that's not as feasible, and there's other parts of the program that are the same, but the coursework exists within the undergraduate environment, and it's just unrealistic that all institutions are going to do the same thing for just one program. There, you'll have to make sure that the components are the same and that the alignment with the goals of the overall program are still being maintained, even though there may be some differences in terms of course titles or how things are implemented. And really, I would just say, keep in mind, we do once again appreciate synergy. What we don't like is, using the same funds for the same things, but synergy, thinking creatively how to achieve your goals and taking advantage of what makes your particular environment specific and is a strength. And I think Dr. Matthews did a beautiful job of highlighting that. Take advantage of your strengths, right? Each place is going to have quote unquote weaknesses, but the objective here is to take advantage of the strengths and to harmonize across the partners and the collaborations, and to make sure that they're real, that no one is just being taken advantage of because of certain demographics or things that you think we would like to see, but that there's a harmonization for the benefit of all schools and all of the trainees.
Thank you so much. That is a wonderful note to leave with and take home with you. Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews, Dr. Jones, and Dr. Jones-London for your time today. Again, I'm going to put in the chat, we have upcoming office hours. So please, if your question wasn't answered today, we highly encourage you to sign up for office hours. This is dedicated time for you to ask those questions ahead of your application. This recording and the slides will be shared with you very shortly. And we hope, you stay in touch and consider applying. So thank you all so much for your time, and see you next time.